G'day YouTube, and welcome back into the Purpose Built Moto Garage. Episode 5 now on our Nemesis Scrambler project. We're going to be diving in onto some more fabrication. We're going to be running through fitting up the Electron carburetor and DNA pod filter, and that will give us the room that we need to start running the headers and then linking up to the muffler pipe. If we get time, we're also going to go through building the bag rack on the back. So let's get straight into it. Being an adventure bike, the obvious choice was to run a set of high-sided headers here. So from the twin port head, we come out around the engine here, and then a 2-into-1 collector that then darts inside the frame, and then that'll come out and come back down here with the muffler mounted high beside the rear shock. So I'm about to lay down my last few tacks here on this section, and then the muffler link will be in here. It's important to make sure you've got most things in place when you're doing this sort of stuff because it's so tight. I had to make sure that my carb was mounted up so I didn't come too close to it when I was making this header here. I'll lay this down and then make sure it's all in place, and then I'll take you over to the bench where I'll run you through my Purge welding setup, and then we'll finish weld this and move on to the muffler. So I'm just setting up my Purge here. My mate recently gave me a setup. So run like a twin regulator on my welding bottle, the gas bottle. And then these are just a set of test plugs that you get from a plumbing shop. Jam that in the end of the pipe. If you have any open joints, which I don't here because I've mostly finish welded this, it's a good idea to tape that up and then plug the other ends with a small hole here. The way that he told me about it was to test the pressure from the outlet side, and if you can sort of feel it on your hand or on your wrist, then you've got enough pressure flowing through it as a good rule of thumb. So I'm about to turn my Purge setup on. I'll finish this welding, then I'll get on to mounting the muffler up. So I've just finished up laying the welds down on my muffler here. So the header's done and the slip joint's going to be directly behind the frame there, which will give you a nice clean finish. I've used a 43mm Purpose Built Moto torpedo muffler, and then I've taken the scallop out of it here. So this is to fit around the rear shock to make sure it fits in nice and tight. What I did is cut this section out here and then used a larger diameter pipe to make a scallop, and then welded that scallop in. Another note, I guess, too, is these welds aren't going to be finished back, so I've been trying to make them as nice as I can. The heat marks will be taken off with a brush, and then it'll just be like a completely brush finished muffler section, but you're still going to see the raw welds. So just finished mounting the muffler up, welding a little tab on the frame here that's threaded. I can bolt the little weld on tab into. When you get these, in the package also comes a DB killer, a little badge to throw on there if you need to get it noise tested with a serial number, and then a weld on bracket. So I've flattened the bracket out to weld it on the back of the muffler here, and then that'll be our link to the frame. Once you start your bike up, if you have an extra loud bike and you want to quieten down a little bit, you can shove this in the end of the muffler, and it's just held in by tack welding it in place. So if we start this bike up and it's too loud, I'll throw that in and it'll sort our problem out. So just before I finish this muffler build off, I mentioned that I fitted our new carburetor and the DNA pod filter. So with the offset carb inlet that you got here, the larger carb that we put on is fouled with the frame. So what I had to do was take a section out of the frame here and then brace that internally. So what I've done is cut that section of the frame out like half the tube width. I've sleeved that with another tube on the inside. So you got double wall thickness there that's plug welded from this side. and then I've just capped that with a bit of flat steel shaped into the shape of our filter that we had to miss there. So the Electron carburetor should give us a bunch more performance out of this little 400, as well as being a carburetor that doesn't use jets. You don't have to tune it as you change altitude. Once it's set, it sort of adjusts itself, and I don't quite understand the magic on how it works, but that's what they've told me. So, and obviously, of course, we're running a DNA pod filter. Now, being an adventure bike, we are going to have to build some sort of airbox around this to protect it from spray on the back wheel and also any wet weather that we come across. So that's going to be a job for another day, but I just thought I'd mention that now, that if you are thinking about fitting this to a Nemesis or an XR400, because they're very similar, you are going to have to run into a bit of trouble with the frame and modify that there. So we're about to kick off the install on these 3-button switches that we'll be mounting on the handlebars. So I always do this previously to when I have everything else on the bars. It's a little bit easier. So I'll set my clutch lever in place, and then I'll leave 130 mil roughly for my grips, and then the switch will fit in here. So first step is to disassemble your switch block, mark where your grip's gonna end, and then you can mark your holes on the bars and drill them out for the internal wiring. Just finished drilling out the handlebars to run our wires for this 3-button switch. So on the inside, on the single switch side, I'll always have the wires running straight into the bar, and then they'll duck out just behind the speedo here. On the twin button side, the wires will run from the push buttons into the center and then through that hole. Saves you drilling 3 holes and sort of further weakening your handlebar. These bars, I always get asked, whether it's legit or not to be able to drill a hole in your handlebars and run your wires. You're not taking that much out of the handlebars, and the wall on these aluminium bars are extremely thick, so I've never had to worry about it. You shouldn't either. So I'm going to solder these buttons up now, put the cable on, and then we can run it back to the electrics tray, and then we'll fit these up. Just about to finish up soldering on these buttons here. A really, really critical point in doing this is to make sure that your solder joint is as small as possible. Because of the small size of these switch blocks, you don't have much room for error here. So in order to make it easy for yourself to install the buttons into the switch block and then the switch block onto the bars, take a bit of time and prep first and make sure your solder joints are nice and small. Button install's been finished up, and then I've gone ahead and installed the Domino throttle tube that comes with the Electron carburetor. Just getting set up and ready so we can start to install these West sliders. So Jono from motoproducts.com.au has given us these West sliders to try out. Normally racers use them because they have to when they're sort of close bar to bar. It stops you from getting your clutch levers and stuff pulled in. Here though, we're going to use them as a bit of a lever protector. So if the bike gets dropped at any point, this is going to cop the brunt of the fall rather than your clutch or your brake lever. So I'm going to go about mounting these. I've got to make up a small slug that fits inside the handlebar, and then we're going to fit these on. So before I bolt on these West sliders, I just thought I'd make mention that these grips that they use on bar end indicators and everything that fits on the end of the bars, I've had nothing but bad experiences with. So I've sort of developed a way that I use on all sorts of things that go on the end of the bars, where you just take a bit of aluminium bar, turn it down to the inside diameter of your handlebar, and thread that to whatever bolt size they use, whether that be M6 or M8 generally. Drill a hole through the handlebar, put a grub screw in here, and that's a surefire way to make sure that these things are never going to fall out. A bit of Loctite to hold your bolt in, and they're not going anywhere. That'll wrap it up for this episode. Now that I've finished the West slider install, got the push buttons put on the front, also installed the Domino throttle, as well as finishing the muffler and the header pipes up. I'm going to finish those header pipes with my brush finish, and that'll be it for the episode. Next time we're going to run through the final stages of fabrication, which will be the bag rack, which we didn't get time to get to today. Also building a little aluminium battery box so we can tuck away somewhere. And then after that, we're pretty much sorted on the fabrication. We can move on to tear down and paint. Nemesis Scrambler project is really starting to pick up some pace, so make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube so you don't miss any more episodes.